Yes, it is.
I called her a complete pain in the ass diva. I did. Because she is, and that's not me talking. That's a direct quote from people in the Fever.
You're tuning into Black and White Sports on.
Let's start with what actually happened before we get anywhere near the rumor mill, because there is a real story here, and it doesn't need to be exaggerated to be interesting. The 2026 Indiana Fever season was supposed to be Caitlin Clark's redemption year. After being limited to just 13 games in 2025 because of a lingering groin injury, she came into this season healthy, motivated, and reportedly determined to finally deliver a full, uninterrupted campaign for a Fever team that has been built around her since the day she was drafted. Instead, the season has been defined by tension, scrutiny, and a swirl of stories that just won't stop following this team around. Clark has already been flagged for accumulating technical fouls at a noticeably fast rate this year, drawing roughly 1 every 4 games, and if you've watched any of the Fever's contests, you know exactly why. She plays with an edge, she argues calls, and she has never been shy about letting officials know when she disagrees with them. That edge boiled over in a very public way on May 30th, when the Fever were blown out 100-84 by the Portland Fire. During that game, cameras caught an animated sideline exchange between Clark and head coach Stephanie White, and within hours it was everywhere. Clips circulated on social media, WNBA commentators picked it apart on air, and it became the centerpiece of a much bigger conversation about whether something is fundamentally wrong inside the Fever organization. That loss came right on the heels of another defeat to the Golden State Valkyries just 2 days earlier, so by the time the Portland game ended, Indiana had dropped 2 straight in ugly fashion, and the timing made the sideline moment land even harder. This wasn't an isolated blip either. Earlier in the season, footage had already surfaced of a heated exchange between Clark and assistant coach Bree in January, which had its own round of viral attention, including women's basketball commentator Cindy Brunson publicly noting January's championship pedigree and suggesting that access to her coaching requires, in her words, an openness that Clark hadn't necessarily shown in that moment. So when the Portland blowout happened, it didn't feel like a one-off. It felt like the latest chapter in something that had been building. Now here's where we have to be careful, because this is exactly the point where a lot of channels start running with things that were never actually confirmed. You have probably seen clips floating around claiming that an anonymous Fever front office source called Caitlin Clark a, quote, complete pain in the ass diva, and that this quote proves some kind of institutional conspiracy against her. That specific phrase has spread widely across social media and reaction content over the past several weeks. But here's the honest answer. There is no verified, on-the-record reporting from a credible outlet confirming that any Fever executive, coach, or official ever said this. It exists as a viral social media claim and as the premise of several YouTube commentary videos, not as something documented by beat reporters who actually cover this team, and not as something the Fever organization has confirmed or denied through any official channel. That distinction matters. A quote repeated 1,000 times on social media is not the same thing as a sourced report, and treating it as confirmed fact when it hasn't been verified is exactly the kind of thing that turns a real, nuanced story into something closer to fiction. So we're not going to tell you that quote is real, and we're not going to tell you it's fake either, because neither claim can currently be backed up. What we can tell you is what has actually been reported, on the record, by people willing to put their names on their opinions. And there's plenty of real material to work with. Fox Sports commentator Jason Whitlock went about as far as anyone has gone on the record, saying flatly that Clark should demand a trade out of Indiana immediately. His argument was blunt. He said she can't fully trust her head coach, her assistant coaches, her general manager, her team president, or even, in his telling, her own agent, because everyone around her is reportedly too consumed with managing the pressure that comes from being associated with her to actually operate normally. Whitlock's take is an opinion, not a report of insider information, and he's been clear that it's his read on the situation rather than something sourced from inside the building. But it's a real, attributable quote from a real commentator, and it captures how loud this conversation has gotten in sports media circles. On the other side, plenty of voices have pushed back on the idea that this is some sort of orchestrated campaign against Clark. Sports Illustrated's WNBA coverage has pointed out that nearly every incident this season, including that same sideline exchange with White, has been blown up into a referendum on the entire organization, when a lot of it is just the normal turbulence of a young, injury-affected, high-pressure team trying to find its footing. That piece specifically noted that even a relatively innocuous sideline conversation can explode into a full news cycle demanding a response from everyone involved, and it argued that a good chunk of the noise around the Fever this year simply isn't worth dignifying with a reaction. It's also worth remembering the roster context, because it explains a lot of the on-court friction that's being read as organizational dysfunction. Indiana went into this season with a serious depth problem, entering free agency with only 3 players under contract heading into the year, Clark included, which forced the front office into a scramble to rebuild the roster around her. Clark herself has been candid about the team's need for a reliable backup ball handler, saying publicly that bringing the ball up the floor against pressure every single possession is exhausting, and that finding someone who can share that load is a real priority for the franchise. That's not a hidden grievance leaking out through anonymous sources. That's Clark, on the record, at a press conference, talking about a real basketball need. Then there's the DeWanna Bonner situation, which added its own layer of drama. Bonner joined the Fever in free agency but only lasted 9 games with the team before requesting a release, with the only explanation given publicly being a vague reference to fit issues. She later resurfaced with the Phoenix Mercury, and when the two teams met again, Bonner and Clark were seen jawing at each other on the court, an echo of tension between them that reportedly dates back to a previous playoff matchup when Bonner was still with the Connecticut Sun. None of that is speculation. Those are documented, on-court incidents that happened in front of cameras and were reported by multiple outlets. So why does any of this matter beyond Indianapolis? Because Caitlin Clark's importance to the WNBA's business model is not exaggerated hype, it's measurable. Her presence has been tied to genuinely massive increases in attendance at road venues and to television audiences regularly topping the multiple millions of viewers for nationally broadcast games, numbers that were simply not part of the WNBA's reality before she entered the league. That's precisely why any hint of dysfunction around her becomes a story that spreads far beyond the Fever fanbase, because national broadcasters, sponsors, and the league office all have a direct financial stake in Clark's environment being stable enough for her to keep performing at a high level and staying visible. When a story like the Diva quote starts circulating, whether or not it's verified, it spreads instantly precisely because people already believe there's smoke somewhere in this organization, and because Clark's value to the league is so outsized that even unconfirmed rumors about friction around her get treated as major news. That's worth sitting with for a second, because it cuts both ways. It means legitimate concerns about how she's being coached or supported deserve real scrutiny. It also means unverified rumors get amplified way beyond what the evidence actually supports, simply because of how much attention anything involving her generates. There's also a piece of this story that's actually confirmed and doesn't get talked about enough. The Fever's own social media team put out an AI-generated promotional image of Clark that mangled her hand in the edit, and Front Office Sports later reported, citing a team source, that the error came from an attempt to digitally combine 2 separate photos using an AI tool. Clark publicly called out the mistake on Instagram. That's a small thing in isolation, but it's a real, sourced example of an organizational misstep involving Clark's image, and it's worth remembering that not every point of friction between Clark and the Fever needs to be dressed up as a shadowy conspiracy to be newsworthy. Sometimes an organization just makes a visible, documented mistake, and it becomes part of a season that already has plenty of separate, legitimate storylines. Layer all of this together, the referee confrontations, the sideline exchange with White, the Bonner exit, the roster instability, the AI photo blunder, and Whitlock's on-air trade demand, and you get a genuinely turbulent season without needing to invent an anonymous leaked quote to make it feel dramatic. None of this means the Fever front office is free of scrutiny, and it doesn't mean fans and reporters should stop asking hard questions about how the organization is managing its most valuable asset. If there is real internal tension between Clark and the coaching staff over offensive philosophy, playing time, or leadership style, that is a completely legitimate story worth following closely, and it's the kind of thing that tends to surface eventually through named sources once trust is established between reporters and people inside the building. What it does mean is that until a credible, named source actually confirms a specific quote like the one currently circulating, the responsible move is to treat it as an unverified claim rather than a confirmed leak, no matter how many channels repeat it as fact. The real story here is compelling enough without embellishment: a superstar carrying a franchise and a league on her back, a coaching staff trying to build a system around her while managing a chaotic roster, a series of very public flashpoints that have played out on camera for anyone to see, and a fan base and media ecosystem so hungry for fever content that even unverified rumors travel at the speed of a viral clip. So here's the actual question worth asking, instead of whether some unverified quote is real: is the tension we've actually seen on camera this season, the sideline arguments, the referee blow-ups, the abrupt Bonner exit, a sign of a franchise still figuring out how to build the right system around a generational talent, or is it just the normal noise that comes with being the most watched team in the league every single night? Drop your honest read in the comments, and if you come across a claim about this team that sounds too dramatic to be true, it's worth checking who actually said it before you pass it along. Make sure to subscribe for more coverage as this season plays out, because whatever the truth turns out to be, it's going to keep being one of the biggest stories in the WNBA.